Welcome to this explainer on why your GED study plan dies on a Thursday. Let's jump right in. You know that feeling, right? You start out on a Monday, totally fired up, incredibly motivated, only to watch that plan completely unravel by the end of the week. Well, I want you to know right now that you are definitely not alone. Today, we are unpacking a deeply universal learning struggle, why our very best intentions so often crash and burn. We're going to dig into some truly fascinating data that explains exactly what happens to our brains and our schedules when we try to learn something new as incredibly busy adults.
So picture this scenario. You made it through week 1, you did the lessons, you are feeling so good, so accomplished. And then Thursday hits. The babysitter cancels at the last second. Or maybe your shift at work runs way too long. Perhaps a surprise bill shows up in the mail and totally throws off your whole evening. You tell yourself, hey, it's fine, I'm just beat, I'll pick it back up tomorrow. But you don't, and here's the secret. Neither does anyone else. That Thursday night derailment, it is incredibly common.
Which brings us to a massive mystery. Why do GED study plans, and really adult study plans in general, just completely die on Thursdays? This question forces us to look at the entire problem differently. Usually when we see massive dropout rates for adult learners, we're talking like 58%, we instantly point the finger at the student. We think, oh, they just lacked willpower, they just didn't want it enough. But what if we flip that? What if we looked at this massive drop-off not as a personal failure, but as a behavioral crime scene that we actually need to investigate? Let's look at the evidence. Our first major clue is something called the Week 2 cliff. This is a really sharp drop in learner engagement that hits right around day 15. For years and years, educators and platform designers just assumed this was a difficulty issue, that the math or the reading just suddenly got too hard for the students to handle. But a 3-year study of a free GDP program found out that is simply not true. The material doesn't suddenly spike in difficulty on day 15. What happens on day 15 is life. That initial burst of motivation, that fresh start energy you had on day 1, just runs out. It collides head-on with the completely unchanging reality of a full-time job, kids, and bills. Thursday is just when that accumulated weekly exhaustion finally peaks and the promise of the weekend wins out.
It all boils down to this, and it's a quote I absolutely love. This is not a willpower problem. It is a design problem. I really want to emphasize this with you because it totally flips the script on how we view adult education. The students who disengage, the ones who need the absolute most help, they aren't failing. They are actually being entirely realistic about a system that was never designed around their real, complicated lives. A study schedule that assumes you have a perfectly quiet, uninterrupted hour every single night, that was built for someone who frankly doesn't exist.
And this leads us to a massive plot twist. Back in early 2026, a US-based education platform was facing a brutal reality. 58% of their users were just disappearing within 3 days. Again, the natural instinct was to blame the learners. They weren't ready, right? They weren't motivated. But a quality assurance team decided to run an audit on the platform's AI tutor, and guess what? They found out the machine, the AI itself, was the culprit. It was causing that massive 58% drop-off. By simply restructuring the AI, they plummeted the drop-off rate all the way down to 21%.
So how exactly did they pull off that massive improvement? Well, they completely abandoned what we call the silent accomplice. That was an AI that responded way too slowly, totally ignored when a student was obviously getting frustrated, and just blindly pushed forward with a stiff, robotic, textbook tone when the learner really just needed a pause. Instead, they transformed it into an empathetic guide. Notice what they didn't do here. They didn't change the curriculum. They didn't make the math easier. They just changed the conversational flow. They made it an intuitive partner that uses a human tone, actually acknowledges your frustration, and knows exactly when to hit the brakes.
And here is an astonishing number that came out of that seemingly simple design tweak, 72%. That is how much incorrect student responses dropped. Let me just repeat that. Incorrect responses plummeted by 72%, literally just by fixing the AI's tone and pacing. Turns out, when students aren't fighting a rigid robotic roadblock, when they actually feel heard instead of rushed, their comprehension and performance absolutely skyrocket. The lesson here is crystal clear. Fix the tutor, and you keep the student.
What's absolutely fascinating is how predictable this whole decay process is. Modern AI early warning systems can now act like a highly accurate weather forecast for student engagement. The AI is picking up on super subtle behavioral decay, stuff a student might not even consciously realize they are doing. It starts in a matter of days with just slightly shorter study sessions. Then, over a few weeks, the gaps between logging in get longer. Then you're answering way fewer questions when you do log in. And finally, you're skipping your review sessions entirely.
And the reason spotting this behavioral decay is so absolutely critical comes down to a single number: 6. These AI early warning systems can identify a learner who is about to quit up to 6 weeks before they actually stop logging into the platform. And they can do it with an incredible 85% accuracy. Think about that for a second. 6 whole weeks of subtle warning signals going off in the background before the student finally throws in the towel and disappears. That is a massive, massive window of opportunity to intervene.
So what do you actually do with a 6-week warning? You send a really simple message. Pick up where you left off. See, adult learners studying for something like the GED rarely ever quit permanently in their own minds. They do what researchers call stopping out. They disappear for a few months, sure, but they almost always intend to come back. The difference between a 3-month pause and a permanent exit is very often just a single, well-timed, guilt-free text message, leaving the door open for them. Platforms that use this predictive model to send that simple message are seeing retention boosts of up to 40%.
This really reveals the much wider shift we are seeing in adult education to fix that Thursday drop-off, moving away from rigid systems and towards smart platforms. A rigid 12-week syllabus assumes you have the exact same energy level every single day, which we all know is totally false. Smart platforms, on the other hand, borrow mechanics from your favorite smartphone apps. They meet learners right on their phone in a simple 5-minute window with just one single question, instead of demanding a full generic lesson. They use same-day nudges perfectly timed to the hour usually study. They use streak freezes that basically whisper, hey, life happens, you didn't fail. By making these empathetic little shifts, platforms are successfully cutting churn from 47% all the way down to 28%.
And we have to talk about the sheer scale of the stakes here, because it is staggering. 19 million. That is the number of American adults currently without a high school diploma. 19 million adults who desperately need these better, smarter, more empathetic systems. Because let's be real, they aren't failing because they can't learn. They are failing because the old systems literally were not built for their chaotic, busy lives.
Now, let's juxtapose that massive 19 million with this incredibly tiny number, 3. The GED testing service, which serves nearly 200,000 graduates a year, deployed AI-powered mobile tools using these exact smart retention strategies, and they saw a 3 percentage point boost in first-time pass rates. Now, a 3-point boost might sound incredibly small to you at first, but it is actually life-changing. Why? Because the vast majority of GED failures miss passing by fewer than 5 points. 3 points is literally the width of the door between being told, try again next year, and hearing the words, congratulations, you passed.
All right, so how do we apply all of this data? If you are tackling a massive goal like the GED right now, here is exactly what the data says actually works to get you across the finish line. First, expect week 2 to suck. When day 12 hits and you desperately want to quit, just recognize it's a known pattern. Everyone hits it, it's not a personal failure. Second, 5 minutes counts. If it's a brutal Thursday and you are exhausted, do one 5-minute question on your phone instead of doing nothing. Third, miss a day, not a week. If you completely blow it on Thursday, just open the app for 30 seconds on Friday. And finally, meet where you are. Use tools that actually fit your real life, like swiping on your phone at 11 p.m., not some fantasy study schedule.
Because it ultimately comes down to this. Thursday is hard for everyone, and showing up anyway, even for 5 minutes, is the whole game. The gap between one missed day and one missed week is the exact trapdoor where most people disappear permanently. So if you can just master the micro habit of giving it 5 tiny minutes on your absolute worst, most completely exhausted day, you completely beat the odds. You keep the momentum alive. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to really chew on. Are you designing your goals for your actual life or for a perfect week that doesn't exist? Whether it's studying for the GED, learning a new language, or starting a business, the friction is almost always in the design, not in your willpower. So, the next time your best-laid plans completely fall apart on a Thursday night, please don't blame yourself. Just redesign the plan. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you conquer your next Thursday